2, 3, 4. Let me tell you about PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps. It's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation. So log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
Welcome to episode 14 of the PuckPedia Hockey Show. Today we welcome on Aaron Schwartz, former director of hockey operations for the Carolina Hurricanes. We talk about Aaron's background and how he ended up navigating through law school after playing a bunch of years at the junior and lower levels in hockey, and then how he ended up becoming an assistant intern for the Washington Capitals and the Montreal Canadiens before landing his job in Carolina. We talk about what it was like in Washington on his first day on the job. The Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup, so Aaron gives us a fun story about that. Then in Carolina, he was a part of the 2022 Calder Cup championships with the AHL Chicago Wolf team. So we talk about how it was like building that roster. And then we talk about Martin Necas' arbitration deal and how he, helped negotiate that as they quote unquote walked him to UFA before then obviously trading him to the Colorado Avalanche in the blockbuster Mikko Rantanen deal. So we get his take on all of that. And then we wrap the episode up with some great advice that Aaron has for people who want to navigate into the hockey space. So without further ado, let's drop the puck. We now welcome on a very special guest to the PuckPedia Hockey Show. It is Aaron Schwartz, former director of hockey operations for the Carolina Hurricanes. Aaron, how's it going?
It's good. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on.
I used your site enough, so the least I can do is return the favor by making a guest appearance and hopefully appeasing your fan base.
Yeah, we've also contributed to the site. We know you had a big article last year breaking down the Mikko Rantanen, Martin Necas trade with the Carolina Hurricanes and the Colorado Avalanche. So the favor is returned as well by you adding some content to the website.
Appreciate it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We'll still see how that trade works out. I mean, I guess you can say that forever, but so far it's interesting and certainly not the end of the story with the Necas extension, and we'll see how Colorado gets value with that.
Definitely. We'll talk about that a little later on in the interview, but I think let's start this just talking about like your background a little bit, how you ended up becoming director of hockey operations for the Carolina Hurricanes. I know I was reading an article today about you where you had a little bit of a tough go of it in high school where you ended up getting kicked out of high school and then ended up playing some club hockey at DePaul. So kind of walk us through your background, both from the hockey lens and also just like the kind of underdog mentality you've had to kind of get yourself to where you were at the Carolina Hurricanes the last few years.
Sure. So I started skating when I was 4 years old, and I played travel hockey and competitively, all the way through pro. But when I graduated from DePaul, I didn't want the dream to be over. I didn't want to go and get a job, and that would be it. I was in really good shape. I considered myself, pretty tough and could handle myself on the ice and hit people. And, coming from club hockey, it was a pipe dream that I could play professionally. But, I dedicated the off season that summer to skating and training every day and networking with people. And I got a tryout in the IHL. Well, I don't know if it was the IHL back then or if it had become the CHL, but I got a tryout with the Bloomington Prairie Thunder where Jason Christie was coaching. And, he said, you're a great skater, you're physical, you're tough. You got no hands, though. You shouldn't be playing forward. So he turned me into a defenseman, and that was career changing because everyone always needs a handy, rugged defenseman. And so, my first year at pro was playing, nowhere you've ever heard of. There's my jersey right there with the Battle Creek Revolution, which was the All-American Hockey League, a level below.
Oh, the Battle Creek Revolution. Everyone knows about the Battle Creek Revolution.
And, I got the first step was getting to play pro. I wasn't making a ton of money, but, there were some stadiums where it was pretty full and, you were getting paid to play and they provided apartments, and what could be better? You didn't care. I was 23 or 24 years old at the time. But I wanted more. The next step was, all right, I want to want to play in the Central Hockey League, or I want to play in the East Coast Hockey League. And I think they still had the IHL. So it was, the next level was, there was a choice of 3 leagues: the IHL, the ECHL, and the Central Hockey League. And, I just kept grinding. I'd go on PTOs to camp, get cut. But finally, the Bloomington Blaze and the Central Hockey League had an injury mid-season, and they called me up, and I spent about a month with them. And, because I added that Central Hockey to my resume, I started being able to get some offers in Europe, not in the top league, but, I left after my time in Bloomington and played the rest of the season in the Czech Republic in the second league there, which was an awesome experience. And then from there on out, I bounced between, playing a handful of games in the SPHL, going to camp with the Missouri Mavericks, the Utah Grizzlies, going out to Europe again, playing in Sweden. I had a tryout in the Austrian league, the Slovak Extraliga, spent some time there. And then, finally, when I was approaching age 30, I was in Poland playing for Katowice, and, our first paychecks didn't come, and they explained that essentially the owners had locked out the players. I don't know what the situation was, but they wanted the imports, the Americans and the Canadians, to stay and not get paid. And, we said, fuck that. We're going to go home. And in order to get our passports back, we kind of had to get into an escalated argument with some Polish mobsters, but we found our way back to the United States. And that was when I knew I had to hang them up. Approaching age 30, I had a college education, and decided I wanted to go to law school because I wanted to get into a front office of an NHL club. So that's how it started.
I'm sure we can do a full episode on you and your teammates against some Polish mobsters and the mafia out there, but we'll keep it a little hockey related there. So yeah, very interesting story. Like kind of battling through some some rugged leagues out there, like the AHL, even like they say the Always Hungry League, and you were kind of even like a league below that, kind of just grinding. But having some cool experiences going overseas as well, and just playing a lot of hockey, but also just seeing how each individual organization is run. And I feel like, just like you said, when you hit age 30, you kind of hit that, all right, I need to be a big boy and kind of move on with your life a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You hear all the stories that the guys talk about when, in the minors on the bigger podcasts, like, Spittin' Chicklets. Oh, they had to play in the AHL and they had to go on a bus. And it's like, we were getting paid $250 a week. Sometimes we didn't have a bus. Sometimes our captain was the bus driver. We were doing it absolutely for the love of the game. There was no money, right? We just did it for the thrill of the game, for our measly, 3,000, 4,000 fans at best. The Central Hockey League's a different story, where you're playing in Fort Wayne in front of, 10,000 fans. But, for down there in those leagues, it's for the love of the game, and that makes it that much better, right? Because it's not a business.
Exactly. It's like they always say, do a job. Like, would you continue to do that job if you didn't get paid money? And a lot of people would say no
Yeah.
because they don't genuinely love it. But for you, it was like, this is hockey. This is what I love to do. You could pay me, $100 a week, and I'm still going to do it because I love this stuff and I want to keep grinding and just get closer to kind of the big show. And you kind of did that, right? So then you went to law school. Built out, like, obviously, like, got your law degree, and then you kind of were building up connections in the NHL, I assume, to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, so from day one when I hung them up, I got calls from buddies that were still playing, because I had been my own agent. I would, I'd call every team once in a while, and I'd track the transactions to see, when teams needed help. And I built a Rolodex, and that's just my nature. And so, guys would start calling me, hey, you're done playing. You want to try to get me called up? And so I started representing, ECHL guys, SPHL guys, and, making no money, just doing it to try to get my foot in the game. And that moved on to, the phone started to ring from AHL players, and then the phone started to ring from NHL players that wanted to go play in Europe. And so throughout law school, I was in the agent game. I did a lot of deals in Germany, Russia, Sweden, Finland, and built a pretty good book of business there, and a lot of relationships with NHL front offices and AHL front offices, which are one and the same, that eventually led to me getting the opportunity that I did with Carolina.
Yeah, when you were kind of doing the agent side of thing, you were working alongside Peter Wallen, who some of the current deals that he has right now under his Rolodex is Victor Hedman, Gabriel Landeskog, Jonas Brodin, Marcus Pedersen. So a lot of those Swedish kind of star players out there, but just like someone to kind of learn from. And then also, I think, does it sound like when you were kind of navigating this, did you have a direction of you want to go the agent route versus the team executive route, or you were kind of in the middle, like you could have went either way?
I just wanted to get in, and I didn't want to wait. And so, I called probably every agent, and I've had these conversations with agents since then, and some of them remember me, calling as a retired 30-year-old player saying, "Hey, I want to get in the agent business." And, of course, none of them took me on, and I was like, "All right, well, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to start repping clients." So that was the easiest way in. That was the easiest way to build the relationships with, both sides of the negotiating table. And, like the guys I used to talk to about my players were, Julian Brisbois. He was the assistant GM in Syracuse. Like he wasn't, GM of Tampa at that time. Same thing with Don Sweeney. I think he was overseeing Providence. So that was the guy that I talked to. And so that was the quickest way to get in. Peter and I met in Sweden. I don't know if I was on a scouting trip or what, but we sat down, and he had a real need for a lot of his players to find European placement after their NHL careers had ended. And he was leaving Octagon at the time and going on his own, so he was looking to build up his firm. And so we went on some scouting trips together to look at some young kids that we thought were promising, and that got cut off when I graduated in 2018, and became a litigation lawyer full time.
Yeah, and then from there, like when you were a litigation lawyer full time, was it always like, how can I use this to stay in the NHL, or was there ever a world where you were like, maybe I'll just stay outside of the NHL and just continue that career path?
I'm trying to think who might have given me the advice. I think it was John Sedgwick that just get your foundational experience in law, litigating, transactional work, talking with clients, negotiating. You need that foundation. No one's going to hire you right out of law school. So I did that for 3 years, and for 3 years in, I was in the U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. I was handling major federal civil cases, criminal cases, trade secret cases, conspiracy cases, espionage cases in Ohio. I mean, all over the place. And that was the nature of being a litigator for a small firm, is that you were in court every day. So, learned pretty quickly, and then I started to reach back out to some of the front office guys that I knew, John Sedgwick in Montreal, and I said, "Hey, I'm a lawyer now. I've been in the agent business. I'd love to get into a front office." And Sedgy was kind enough to, throw me some of their RFAs during the off season, and said, "Hey, just give me a write up. What do you think?" And so I worked with him for a little bit, and he explained their process. And then while I was studying for the bar, I guess we're backing up. I went out and I was an intern for Don Fishman at the Washington Capitals. And this is a funny story. So we had picked the 2-week date that I was going to come out to Washington and be an intern in the wintertime, mid-season. And so we're like, okay, middle of June, that works, right? Like a couple weeks before the bar exam, like you'll come in and you do your 2 weeks. So I get there, they're in the Stanley Cup finals, and I'm sitting at some scout's desk that's on the road, watching playoff games. And sure enough, they go. I don't know if it was Game 5 or Game 6, but the whole office packed up in the private jet and went to Vegas. Of course, I'm the intern, so I was literally the only one just sitting in the office. I'm still doing my work, and they won the Stanley Cup that night, and I'm literally that's my first time I had ever been in an NHL front office, and the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup. So I made Don Fishman promise me that he was going to get me a Stanley Cup ring. And then, so the next day, naturally, I'm like, well, do I come into the office? What? And Don's like, yeah, he's like, I don't know. Like, we were just in Vegas all night, like, do what you want. And I'm like, well, I'm going to come to work. That's what I'm here to do. So I show up bright and early to the practice facility, which is where the offices were. And of course, there's a line down the street of fans. They had just won a cup the night before. And, here's me in my suit. And I'm, I kind of look like an athlete still. I'm only a few years removed from being a player. And I got my backpack and I start walking from the parking lot into the entrance, and the crowd goes wild. And
You start signing autographs?
No, I was like, in my mind, I was like, you guys have no idea who I am. I am just an intern. But I got in with the key card I had or whatever and went and sat at my desk. Of course, no one was there, but that was wild. And, so under Don, I was working on, I think it was the Tom Wilson arbitration case at the time. And, we spent our 2 weeks together, and then it was, I went and studied for the bar, passed the bar, obviously, and away we were.
Did you end up going to Don Tito's in Arlington with Ovi and the boys to lift
No,
up the cup?
no.
Or maybe some fountain jumps in the middle of DC?
No, I was just trying to stay under the radar. I had my fun as a player, and was, just trying to keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. So.
For sure. I mean, it sounds like a cool experience though, right? Like kind of going through some of those important arbitration cases. And I assume those kind of experiences, both with Montreal and Washington, kind of led into how you kind of got your role with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah. I mean, I put it on my resume. Of course, everyone knew, I was an intern. I wasn't, there full time, but at least that I had, had those experiences. I was an attorney. I had been in the agent business, and I had played professionally, no matter what level it was at. I mean, that there is some credence given to playing at the pro level. So, I think it was what Craig Heisinger reached out to me one day and said, Bill Armstrong just got the GM job in Arizona. He's looking for a salary cap contract lawyer guy. I gave him your name. I think he wants to interview you. And, so Bill Armstrong called my cell phone. We talked, and then I did an interview with him. And I guess at the time it was Alex Murillo Jr. And went through that whole process. And I didn't get the job. I was devastated. They gave it to David Ludwig, who does a fabulous job there.
We had on the podcast
a
couple months
he's
ago.
Great. David's great. And, we became good friends, obviously, but, his career started off rough because he was in Arizona and I was flying high in Carolina. And now the roles are reversed because I'm sitting home, and, he's got a great new ownership, and they're on their way. But that was tough. That was, I thought, all right, that was my one shot, and I blew it. And I don't know, maybe a few weeks later, either Bill Zito. No, it was Julian Brisbois. Him and I were talking, and he said, Paul Krapelka just left the Carolina Hurricanes. You should call Don Waddell because, they don't like to pay money and you're cheap. And I said, perfect. And I was on the phone with Don that day, and we were in Florida at the time, and we were driving up the East Coast. I guess this is around Thanksgiving, to go to my brother's. And I told my wife, I said, let's stop in Raleigh, even though we don't have to, because I want to meet with Don in person. She's like, okay. So we stopped at this hotel in Raleigh, and I had texted Don on the way, and I said, let's meet tomorrow. I think it was a Saturday. And he agreed to meet, and we we sat down and hit it off, and the rest was history. I think Wendell Young gave him a good reference as well, because Wendell Young and I've known him since I was a little kid, from when I was a Wolves fan, and then I had trained at their facility when I was in the off season when I was playing, and so I knew Wendell, and so he put in a good word, and that was it.
Yeah, and then like from there, like you worked there for a few years. You were a part of the Calder Cup winning team in 2022 with the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, Carolina's affiliate. You obviously went through the time when they didn't have an affiliate, and then they did have an affiliate again. But you also helped bring in some core pieces to that team, like Jalen Chatfield, like a Stefan Nason, who's now with the Devils, obviously, but just really like solid guys. You also were a part of the Jack Drury and Martin Necas arbitration cases, salary cap strategy, contracts negotiations, did a lot of different things in Carolina. Why don't you talk us through like some of that stuff, or like what you really took away from that time there and what you were able to learn? Just like you mentioned, like Don Riddell's a legend of the game, like just learning from someone like that.
It was a fabulous place to cut my teeth. Thin front office. Everybody did everything. The only thing that I didn't touch was amateur draft and amateur scouting. But I was involved in pretty much every conversation, and oversaw the minor league staffing and all things legal. So it was great. And Don, he was so busy as president and GM, meaning he was overseeing the business side and the hockey side, that we were entrusted with a lot of power. And he was obviously the ultimate decision maker, but he gave us a lot of he trusted us, and it was great, because there was just no conversation that I wasn't a part of. So I got to see how the organization operates from the top down. The Calder Cup year, that was the first time that I had put together the minor league roster. And I remember, after we had spent all the money, because we did spend a lot of money on those players, Donnie came into my office, and he's like, let me know when you need my ring size for the Calder Cup. And sure enough, we won that year. But you got to give credit to our scouting staff, and Wendell, who helped with the process. There was a lot of guys that got lost in the mix in that COVID taxi squad shuffle, and Jalen Chatfield happened to be one of those guys that just didn't get an opportunity, could skate like the wind, and we had a very, very good coach in Ryan Warsofsky in Chicago, who helped turn around and develop a lot of players in our organization. Same thing with Stefan Nason. He wasn't getting great results out in San Jose, but they didn't have a great club at the time. And I looked on video and saw the way that he scored goals, and like that was transferable to the NHL. I mean, his net front presence. So that, again, there was a lot of luck in that. But also a lot of fabulous people helping. But that was a great team. There was a lot of great prospects. I mean, Jack Drury at the time, he was in the minors full time, and Kochekov, that was what his first year pro maybe in America. So they had a lot of good young talent and the right vets, and Chatfield and Nason slotted into our system perfectly. It's too bad Nason went to New Jersey. That would have been a player I would have wanted to hang on to, because he had everything, and he could be a prick, and he was tough, and I think New Jersey's got a good contract there for the next few years.
Yeah, as a Devils fan, I do love that deal for Nason. He signed under $3 million, only a 3-year term. He was playing power play one right in the front net front last year, and he found a really valuable role. He was even seeing some line one time at 5v5 with Timo Meyer and Nico Hischier. So he's a guy that can play up and down the lineup. Right now, he's just coming back from injury, so he's slotted on their fourth line. But yeah, like you said, very versatile, a lot of transferable skills to the NHL level. Question two, like with the whole like AHL, NHL kind of just Do you think that it's important for a team to have like a really strong AHL foundation to then have success in the NHL, both like teaching the winning ways at that level, but also some teams I feel like play completely different systems at the AHL and NHL level, and they're not like they're kind of siloed and they don't like work together. Like, how important do you value a strong AHL team to help the NHL level?
It's so cliche because I'm going to say what everybody says is you need balance and you have to win and develop, blah, 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 blah. But it's so true. I mean, if you just use it as, all right, let's sign some guys and just play our prospects every night and work them into oblivion. Like, first of all, physically, it's not going to work because they're going to need nights off. And personally, my theory is that when you're not playing well, you need to get fucking benched because it's going to happen in the NHL. You don't get to turn over the puck in the high offensive zone because you tried to do something fancy, and then you get, you go back out there and make another shift, get another shift. So, that's probably where I would differ is that, I still think that there should be, merit to playing time, but of course you want to have the right vets around your players. There's only one head coach. That's not going to be enough for all players. So you might as well have, de facto coaches in seasoned veterans who've been there and done it before all around your team. And that's, I think, is what made our group in Chicago special. And we had some good vets the next season in Mackenzie McCachran. He was a good fit. But to go the Hershey Bears route where you've got, mostly vets, and of course you've got the veteran rule, but you have to have a balance, but you also have to mimic the NHL as best as you can, right? Like a pilot, sitting in a flight simulator. So there has to be some adversity. You don't just hand the playing time to the player. But that's my philosophy. Everyone's got their opinions. I think Warzy played the part perfect for us in Chicago.
Yeah, now you look at his success, right? Shifting over, he's now the head coach of San Jose, so definitely kind of worked out for him. Let's shift gears a little bit before we kind of wrap this up here. I do want to talk about a couple of the arbitration deals that you were a part of when you were in Carolina. So let's talk about Martin Necas in particular. So you guys went to arbitration with him and ended up, I think, on a 2-year deal around $6.5 million per season. Quote unquote, walking him to UFA. So maybe talk to me about why you guys, like the organizational philosophy and yourself in particular, were comfortable doing that. And then we can kind of touch on the deal with him getting 11.5 versus Rantanen getting 12 and what you make of all that and the trade last year.
Yeah, so we knew it wasn't going to be a long-term fit in Carolina at that point. Not so much us, because maybe there were still lingering questions as to what he was going to turn out to be. My personal view is, he just didn't show up in playoffs. And when the game got physical, he kind of disappeared. And that was, that's concerning. But he didn't like the system. Like, he's a very skilled offensive player with a ton of speed, and he needs to be
He needs a creative system, whereas Carolina's not.
Yeah. So, the writing was on his wall, and I don't know how much it was, him and his father or his agent, but, we knew we had a great asset there, and we needed to protect it and wait for, the right move. So, the stigma around walking a player to free agency, the reason we did the deal the way we did it is we didn't want to get into an offer sheet where, he couldn't be moved in the last year of the deal, and then you get, essentially nothing. And it was a slim chance, but you have to assume that people were looking to offer sheet Carolina, just because of the past history, between Carolina and Montreal. But, that's kind of the way we structured it. He filed for we didn't actually go to a hearing. We got,
which is the case pretty often in the NHL, I'd say. They
9
don't really
times
have
out of 10.
many.
Yeah. And you saw last year that I don't even think there was I don't even think there was an arbitration order.
Swayman was close. I think he was really
Yeah.
close, and then they settled.
Yeah, but there was, when the cap goes up, usually teams can find money, and it's, it's not, you don't want to, drive that wedge between you and the player over, a few amounts of dollars, which, you've got the cap flexibility. So I don't think we'll have a lot of activity in the arbitration space for a bit until we start to, flatline the cap a little bit. But, when you looked at what Necas got over those 2 years, like it was a pretty good deal, which obviously Colorado thought, because they were like, all right, we'll acquire that. Here you go, take our star player. So that was a group effort in Carolina that I thought was pretty successful.
Yeah, and then now we're looking at it, right? Like hindsight's always 2020, but you got Mikko Rantanen on the Dallas Stars with an $8 by $12 million deal. You got Martin Necas in Colorado with an $8 by $11.5 deal, and then you have Logan Stankoven who has on an 8 by I think like maybe $6 or $7 million, like nothing crazy, very like long-term deal, cost control type of deal. And Carolina also acquired a couple first-round picks because of moving the assets around like that. What are your kind of thoughts on just like that landscape and like how that trade has now played out almost 12 months since it went down last year? I think it was like December.
If you're looking in the short term where Carolina was, I would have probably done things differently. I would have wanted to have gotten assets back to help me in the playoff run that season. But, give credit where credit is due. Like Stankoven he's a really good fit for Brendan Moore, for the system. He's not. I like big players. I like tough players. Like I'm always biased on that. He plays bigger and he can skate and he makes plays, and he doesn't take shit from anybody. So I think that'll be a good long-term fit, and good on them for locking him up long-term. And I guess you kind of see with Rantanen, there was a lot going on there. I was an outsider at that point, but it was obvious he didn't want to be there. It was obvious he didn't like the system. He didn't buy into the system. And those two things alone, showed up in his play. So I think he's finally found the right home in Dallas, and he's got his fellow Finns there. So it worked itself out. We'll see what Carolina does with the picks acquired there. Although maybe they've already done something with at least one of those picks, right? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't either. I'm not sure if they might have moved it. Maybe the Keandre Miller offer sheet, they might have used one there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays.
They didn't offer sheet him. That was a straight up trade.
Yeah, they would have offer sheeted him, but they ended up making the trade at the last minute instead, which ended up working out. Like I think he's going to be another guy who's probably going to be a pretty good fit in that system. I know he's injured right now, but
no, that's another one that they needed some what I call heaviness on the back end that they have been lacking. So that was a good move to young player, and again, we'll see, right?
exactly. We'll have to wait and see. Well, Aaron, this has all been great. One last question. This is kind of the question we ask everyone. It's our cool bet question. If you go to puckpedia.com/coolbet, you can get in on the action today. Stay cool and bet responsibly. Go to puckpedia.com/coolbet. Just want to ask you just general advice for some of the listeners who are trying to kind of break into the hockey industry, as someone like yourself, especially who had kind of an unconventional path, to shows you don't have to necessarily be related to someone or be kind of a star player like in the league to kind of end up making waves and being able to get into a front office or the agency side of things. What advice would you give to some of the listeners who might either have the legal background or kind of just some general hockey knowledge?
Yeah, I'll address the general population there of people who want to get in. Number one, it's about relationships, and sending an email or a text message isn't going to start a conversation. Use the phone. Call people. They might not answer. You leave a message and send a text, say, hey, I called. You'd be surprised how many doors that opens, because nobody calls anymore. Nobody has conversations on the phone. for me, my path was through legal. I had the playing experience as well, but I had to get the foundational training and knowledge in my craft, which was being a litigator for a number of years. And so it's hard for kids coming out of college, especially they have all these sports programs. They think they're going to go right to an NHL front office. Then they might, but they're going to be selling tickets.
Right.
So
You're going to be on the business side.
Yeah. And, do what I did. Do your job on the side and call major junior teams, call minor league teams, offer to scout, offer to do this and that. Just get in any way you can. Call USHL teams, and start somewhere, because once you get that first program on your resume, it's not going anywhere. Like, you use that. But it's tough. It's tough business. I mean, I know every GM and assistant GM in the league, and I had 5 years experience, and I'm sitting at home right now. There's only 32 of those jobs, right? So it's tough, but relationships are key. And I know there's organizations that do networking events, whether it's stats, analytics. Get involved. Fly, if it's in California, fly to California, do it. Meet people. You have to meet people. Because a lot of the hires are, I know a guy, I remember a guy from this and that. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Well, that's super helpful, and I'm sure the listeners will take that to heart. Probably a lot of the listeners aren't phone callers, but maybe now they'll start because you said so. And I think it's an interesting point. Like you said, a lot of it's text or email, but no one's just picking up the phone and
Yep.
dialing anymore. So I think that could be super helpful. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for the time. Good luck with everything. I think this was super helpful and just great insight on both the contract side of things and your kind of navigation in the hockey industry.
Thanks so much for having me.
PuckPedia.com